They say every single holiday that we celebrate is celebrating one of the 7 deadly sins. Every single holiday.
Okay.
Think about it. So the easiest one, Valentine's Day, celebrates the sin of lust.
Okay.
Christmas celebrates, here, I'm gonna show you, bro.
Okay, let me see.
Check this.
Christmas.
It's a whole list.
This Christmas.
Okay, boom. Easy one. Ready? Valentine's Day represents lust for
Yeah.
obvious reasons. Now, Thanksgiving, that celebrates the sin of gluttony.
Gluttony, yeah, because you're eating.
Because you're eating a lot. You're overeating. You're taking too much of the more than you need.
Yeah.
Now, Christmas, what do you think that is?
Christmas. Greed?
Greed,
Yeah.
overconsumption, and excess.
Okay.
Right? Wanting more of something.
That makes
We're
sense.
celebrating gifts. We're celebrating gifts. We're not really even celebrating like the birth of Christ because people are so focused on the gifts and shit. Now, Easter. This one's interesting.
I don't know.
The holiday of Easter, what sin would it be?
Easter. I don't know.
Check this out. This one gets deep.
Okay.
So they say it's envy because the Romans were jealous of Jesus, so they murdered him.
Oh.
It's crazy.
Shit.
So St. Patrick's Day, it's sloth because
Why?
people get blacked out drunk.
Oh, what the fuck?
Yeah. Now Halloween is what? It's wrath. So scaring and hurting people for fun. With masks, it's wrath.
Oh.
So every single one of the holidays is like a 7 deadly sin.
All right, Shalom. I want to start this off by giving honor, praise, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Wahara Kakwadash. Double honors, salutations, peace, and blessings to the elect men of Israel, starting with the elder apostles, the elder bishops, GMS, on down to the rest of you brothers and the brothers I labor with, who all push forth the one doctrine of Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, and all faith, truth, and sincerity, according to the true understanding of the scriptures. To all of you, I say Shalom. Now, this video that I came across, it's just clear, like basically like they niche is to talk about, which for those of you that may not have seen them before, these two, what they appear to be Japhites possibly, but nonetheless, these two dudes, they always get to talk about different conspiracy theories, But over here we deal with conspiracy fact, right? And one thing that stood out to me is in this video they talk about the 7 deadly sins, and people don't understand the difference between traditions of men versus things that are historically and biblically recorded, because when I seen this, the first thing that came to mind was, where do you see within the Bible 7 deadly sins being spoken about? So what I did, right, was I went to Chat GPT, and I asked them, from a biblical standpoint, where does the 7 deadly sins come from? And it says, which it gives a pretty accurate response, but it says from a strictly biblical standpoint, which that's where we always gonna come from, right? We supposed to hold to the Lord's word. We're supposed to speak according to the Lord's word. Nothing else. Add nor take away from the word, But it says the 7 deadly sins are not listed as a formal set anywhere in the Bible. So this is just a made-up jive. It says the idea actually comes from early Christian tradition, not directly from Scripture. You see? So this is already telling you these are just traditions of men, But this could be a learning moment in regards to what's actually written in the scriptures, right? And also seeing how, though they mention these specific things in regards to what the sins are, pride, wrath, gluttony, lust, whatever the other ones are, but which it go on to list them, but nonetheless, this is something that will still be informative in regards to what the scriptures do say. You know, because you have a lot of Christians, Catholics that go on to mention different things that are completely outside of the scriptures. So now you take your mind away from the scriptures and you start studying other things rather than what it is you need to be studying and need to be perfecting your understanding with, which is the Lord's word, you know? So I'm going to get one quick scripture before we jump into this. And this is, I believe this is it. Yeah. You can see that. I switched it up, but this is Ecclesiastes 12 and verse 12. It says, "And further, by these, my son, be admonished." Right? And it says, "Of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh." Right? So I grabbed this for the point of you going on to study other things outside of this book is just a weariness of the flesh. You know? This is something to be admonished with, right? Which that word admonish goes into what? It says to warn, to reprimand someone firmly, right? Yeah, you see rebuke, reprove, chastise, you see? So basically, these are things to make sure that you are you are firm on. You know, things that this is something that you want to make sure that you keep in mind and you don't veer off with. You know, because to get rebuked, to get chastised is all for the purpose of being corrected and perfected, you know. So this is something that's key to help with staying correct and striving for that perfection, you know. But again, it says, right, the last end of it, right, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. So, you know, it's not just allowing your flesh to just run rampant, you know, like most people in the world do. Like what most Christians, so-called Christians, you know, what most worldly believers go on to do, you know. They hear a good story from somebody that, you know how to tell it to where then now they mind get taken into a whole nother realm outside of where they need to be at, you know, which is simply what the scriptures go on to say. So like it says, it's not listed, you know, and it's something that comes from quote unquote Christian tradition, right? And it says where the idea came from. It says the concept developed over time. It says in the 4th century, a monk named Evagrius Ponticus, and I may have said that wrong, but it says listed 8 evil thoughts, like gluttony, lust, anger, etc. Later, in the 6th century, Pope Gregory I refined the list to 7. You see, and the Pope is a part of the Roman Catholic Church, and all that shit is just Esau's deception with promoting a slew of a whole lot of more wickedness. A whole lot of wickedness is done, you know, behind closed doors, within the Vatican and within the Roman Catholic Church. You know, they do a whole lot of things serving other gods. It's a whole lot of paganism. You know, so these aren't things to lean upon if it's not within the scriptures. You know. Now, the things that's mentioned in regards to what each of the sins are Those are things that you will find within the scriptures, but there's no such thing within the scriptures as the 7 deadly sins. So it says, continuing, then Thomas Aquinas further organized them in his theological writings. It says that's how the classic list came to be, right? And this list that they have: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth, right? So now it goes on to say what is in the Bible. It says, while the Bible doesn't group sins into a 7 deadly list, it does list and describe many sins, sometimes in groups. And then it goes on to mention, and by the Spirit, this was the first thing that came to mind in my head, just listening and thinking. You're not gonna find seven deadly sins in the scriptures, but you are gonna find something, that the Lord said that He hates, right? And this was what had came to mind on myself, the book of Proverbs 6:16, right? And it goes on to list it right here, but I'm gonna actually bring it out within the word, So it says, Proverbs 6:16, these 6 things doth the Lord Yahweh, right? Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua hate. 7 are an abomination unto Him. It says, a proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, and heart that devises wicked imagination, feet that be swift to running, feet that be swift in running to mischief. It says, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren. You see? So these are things that's written in regards to things that the Lord hates. And these are all different sins, that people commit. Right? So it goes on to make that list here, where it says, a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that run to evil, a false witness, and one who sows discord, right? And really, within these 7 things that's mentioned within the scriptures, right? You can find all of these, but with them like mentioning these things, it's almost like they only like pinpointing for you to look at it as something from one specific way, and that's basically how the church is set up. The church is set up for you to just listen and follow and be a slave, versus you actually doing your due diligence to look, to sit and meditate and think upon what could fall into this category, what could fall under the umbrella, if you will, of a lying tongue, what could be an example of running to evil, or giving a false witness, right? Sowing discord, it's like one that's gossiping, right? One that just likes to talk and just be talking out their ass and not actually having proof, or being mindful being mindful in regards to what they say and the effects that can come with it. Like the Lord's word is set up in a way to actually make you sit and consider. That's the beauty of His word. That's the beauty of Him mentioning these 7 things that He hates. Hands that shed innocent blood. There's a slew of different ways that you can shed innocent blood. Esau Edom goes on to show that within, how he lives, how he operates. All these things are set up in a way for you to really consider reality. Granted, these things are real things, so it ain't to take away from these things being real things, nor taking away from these things being mentioned within the scriptures, because you see accounts where these things are mentioned in the scriptures. But nonetheless, the Lord has it set up for us to be able to actually sit and consider, because that's a part of our job. A part of our job is to reflect, you know. It's not like where you just taught how is it, like you're just showing something and that's it, versus you actually being taught how to see something, you know, or how to seek it and find it for yourself, you know. It's like you can fish for a man versus you teaching the man how to fish, you know. Having one or the other of those traits, you know what I'm saying, one's going to go a lot farther than the other one is, right? No one that's making sense. So it says, continue, right? This is probably the closest thing in scripture to a 7 list of serious sins, but it's not the same as the latter 7 deadly sins. And that's key. That's true, right? It says other sins, other sin lists in the Bible, which goes on to reference Galatians 5:19, which that's a good one, right? And as well as Romans 1:29, you know, both of those going on down, because those are both good reads, and they both go on to mention things in regards to sin, you know. But it goes on to say, bottom line, right, the 7 deadly sins are a latter theological summary, not a direct biblical list. So, again, we know it says in Isaiah 8:20, what? To the law and to the testimony, right? So, according to the Lord's word and the testament that comes with it, it says, if they speak not according to this word, it is because there is no light in them. You see? So all things that are being spoken must come also from the scriptures. You know? The Lord, his spirit is in all things. So everything within the world, because it's because of his spirit being in all things, the Lord has a word that can tie into everything. You know? The real question is, have you considered? Right? And that take time, you know what I'm saying, attention, consideration, to really be able to learn it and know how to do that, how to see it, you know, how to see the Lord's word and everything. But it jumping in here, right? So it said what? It says they were created to organize and teach about human sin tendencies. However, each of those sins is addressed somewhere in the Bible, just not grouped together in one official list. You see? So those things are within the scriptures somewhere, right? But it's not you know, a list like how they go on to make it, right? And the reason why you don't want to get into the habit of doing that is because you look at Esau and you look at how he's dealt with the word, you know. He deals treacherously with it, you know. He uses it for his own benefit, and the way that he has used it is in a way to continue to keep making traditions of men, you know. And I keep mentioning that, so I'm gonna grab the scripture talking about that real quick. Yeah, heavy. Yeah, I'm gonna start at verse 6. This is Mark 7:6. It says, he answered and said unto them, well has Elias, talking about Isaiah. It says, well has or Isaiah, so like I said that wrong. Well has Isaiah prophesied of you hypocrites, as it is written, this people honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. You see? So everybody talk a good talk. Everybody say they believe in it, or they believe in God, or all these different things. Just like with celebrating these false festivals, fake solemn assemblies being called holidays when it's really supposed to be a holy day, right? They celebrate these things going completely against what the scriptures say, going completely against what the Lord say. It says, verse 7, howbeit in vain do they worship me. You see, they doing it to be seen, right? They doing it to be portrayed and looked at it in a certain way, and that's how Esau tries to use the book. When you look at the movie, The Book of Eli, right? The Edomite in the movie, he was trying to use the word for his own better, to build him up for wicked and malicious intentions. He said if you just had the book, you could control the whole world. Everybody know that there's power within these words, but nobody actually knows how to read them. You know what I'm saying? Only people that have been set up to understand and know how to read these words is the Lord's elect, right? The true saints, the true prophets, the true teachers. Starting with the elder apostles and elder bishops of the Great Millstone Church. But it says what? Howbeit in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. You see? Not the commandments of the Most High, but the commandments of men. It says, for laying aside the commandment of God, ye hold the tradition of men, as the washing of pots and cups, and many other such like things ye do. You see? It says, and he said unto them, full well ye reject the commandment of God, man, that ye may keep your own traditions. And that's heavy because it just makes me think of what it says in I believe it is Judges, the very last chapter and the very last verse. It says what? Judges 21 and verse 25. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. You see? And you're not supposed to trust in your heart. You ain't supposed to trust in your own mind. Right? Why? What is I'm thinking of? 7 and 9? No. No, I'm butchering it. $17. That's it. Shalakia. 17 and 9. So Jeremiah 17 and 9, it says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? You see? And that's why the Lord has it said in Proverbs 3 and 5, right? Trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not on thine own understanding. You see? So you trust in the Lord's word over your own, over man's, over the flesh, right? Because again, your mind is subject to going to hell off because it's in this flesh. But the Most High, his mind isn't subject to the flesh. You know, his ways and his thoughts are higher than ours. Right? He's on a whole nother level than us. That's why we trust in his word, and the word that has been set up by men moved by the Holy Spirit. You know what I'm saying? Men that have been ordained and set up and established by the Most High. Right? So that's pretty much that right there. But it basically went on to mention how it could show, you know, the scriptures where each of those seven so-called seven deadly sins are mentioned. Basically, just each of these specific things, you know, and where you can find them within the scriptures, right? So it goes on to show, and because I said yes. So it shows pride, right? It says the root of many sins, self-exaltation over God or others, right? So you're basically going on to it's like basically you going on to try to trust in yourself, do what the hell you want to do versus, you know what I'm saying, doing what the Lord tell you to do, right? Thinking it's you in a position of authority, you know, in comparison to the Lord. That's not the case, right? That, or you trying to go, you know, against the grain with your own program. You know what I'm saying? One that's not founded within the Lord. But it says what? The book of Proverbs 16:18. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. You know, that's a good one. It says James 4:6. God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. Right? And these are all key things, you know. You don't want to be proud. You know, you want to be in a state of humility, being humble. Right? You got greed, shows lust. You know, they got a lot of them here, you know, in regards to the scriptures that's going into them. I haven't looked at all of them, but nonetheless, the point really was pretty much made with these things that were spoken about above. Because simply, you know, this was just me trying to touch on the simple fact that you're not gonna find the seven deadly sins within the scriptures, because that's the traditions of men, you know. Again, it says the idea actually comes from early Christian tradition, right? And as we just got done reading, and what was that, Mark 6, you know. Matthew. What was it say? Yeah, Mark 7. As it went on to mention, right? This is one of the ways our people go off, you know, trying to follow the traditions and the commandments of men, right? But most people don't know that the Lord said in Amos 5:21, it says what? It says, I despise your feast days, and I will not smell in your solemn assemblies. Right? Because these so-called solemn assemblies, these feast days that people celebrate, they're vain. You know? It's all vanity. It's for them to give off a certain persona. Like, one thing that they mentioned inside the video is, you know, must do things for the sake of getting gifts, for the sake of, you know, basically feeding their flesh, simply, right? To sum it all up, people celebrate these holidays to feed their flesh, when the whole purpose of holy days was set up for us to remember the things that the Lord did for us, to remember the position that we are in because of the Lord, to remember the favor that we are to receive, that we are able to receive from the Lord if we stay on track, stay on task, stay on that straight and narrow. Keeping His commandments, hearkening unto His voice, listening, obeying, right? Lord say, going to mention what true love is, 15 and 14, 14 and 15. It says, if ye love me, keep my commandments, right? Because that's what love is. And you got 1 John 5 and 3 and 2 John 1 and 6. It says, 1 John 5 and 3, for this is the love of God, that we keep His commandments, right? Not the commandments of men, His commandments. And His commandments are not grievous. You see? Why? Because when you follow the Lord, that's how you're going to prosper. Joshua 1 and 8. When you keep His words in your mouth, that's how you bring much success onto yourself and bring your life into a state of being able to prosper, right? Because it's all found within the Lord. 2 John 1 and 6, it says, and this is love, that we walk after His commandments. This is the commandment, that as ye have heard from the beginning, ye shall walk in it. You see? So just as it says in, what's the other one I'm thinking of? First John 2 and 6, I'm thinking of. Yep. 1 John 2 and 6, it says, he that saith he abideth in Him ought himself also so to walk, even as He walked. And the NLT says, those who say they live in God should live their lives as Yahushua did, right? And that's it. That's the key. That's the point. Yahushua, his will was to do the will of the Father. And that's what we are to do in likeness. So that's following His word, His commandments, not following the commandments of men, nor the traditions of men. Because those are the things that the Lord doesn't approve of, because they do them for all the wrong reasons. But the Lord, He sets up these things for all the right reasons. So that's pretty much it. Lord willing, this was edifying. With that, I'm going to give honor, praise, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Wahara Kakwadash. Till next time, Shalom.